Today's video, we are going to look at intergovernmental organisations. Now, intergovernmental organisations are useful for the globalisation part of the unit and also in superpowers as well, which is a unit maybe that you'll do in year 13. So it's useful for both, and we'll talk about how we can use the IGOs in each bit of the course. So I'm going to start first of all, before I go through all the IGOs, I'm going to talk just generally about how IGOs work, what they are, and the pros and cons, that kind of thing, and where they fit into the two different units in the A-level geography. So the IGOs, there's many of them. Intergovernmental means many governments working together, and we can see that by working together as a government, you're a lot more powerful, you're a lot stronger, you have a lot more of an impact on your economy and how much you trade by working together with other strong governments and making decisions between you that talk about how trade will work, trade agreements, and this is what we'll be doing a lot maybe if we leave Brexit and we have to renegotiate a lot of our deals with other people. We are part of other organisations. So there's a lot of overlap between the membership of the IGOs. Many countries are members of many of these IGOs. However, most of them are from North America, Europe, Japan, Australia, and to a limited extent the BRICS, which will come on, there are a few of them, but sub-Saharan Africa and places in southern America and other Asian places are not involved. And if you're not part of those discussions, then you'll find it really, really difficult to have any power and any say or be part of globalization. So with the globalization unit, they are there to promote globalization and promote trade. So being a member of an IGO helps with globalization because it gives you links to other countries. So in your globalization unit, you can use IGOs as examples of organizations that help the process of globalization. And we know that globalization just means links between countries. So the IGOs working together forging those links between each other, whether that's about trade or whether it's loans or whether it's agreements on climate change or whatever it is. If you're part of those talks, then it gives you, it makes you more globalized. So that is where we are in terms of its implication for globalization. That links, countries are linked together. So for the purpose of superpowers unit, then these organizations promote power because you get to influence other parts of the world. You get to make decisions. You get to have conversations, and you get to be part of a group of countries that's working together to improve trade and essentially to improve capitalism, to improve trade between the countries, to improve your role as how much money you're going to make as a country. So for both units, it's really, really important. One with globalization, about how you can be more globalized. If you're a member of one of these IGOs, you'll work more, you'll have more dealings with other countries, so you'll be more globalized. And if you're looking at it from the purposes of the superpowers, then it gives you more influence and power over other countries, and it makes you part of the conversation, as it were, to change things and to increase your trade and your capital flow, etc. So I'm just going to run over these. There's lots of notes here. I've posted this on the Instagram account, so you can have a look at these notes. They are quite detailed. You might want to take a picture of them and maybe use it as your revision. But I'll just go over some of them. I've grouped them together, and we're going to look at what they are and maybe how they lead to globalization and power. So the first group is the IMF and the World Bank. Now obviously these are banks, and they were set up post-war, mostly anyway, in relation and in conjunction with the Bretton Woods organisation that was set up post-World War II. We've talked about that in another video, about how America tried to get involved in giving loans to Europe to help them recover after the Second World War. So they primarily gave loans to Europe to improve infrastructure, improve trade and promote development. Okay, now the IMF is slightly different. Its role is to facilitate trade really and to stabilise currencies. It monitors economies and it can provide short-term aid, and it's involved obviously in the SAPs as well, which is the loans that get given to poorer countries, which we've looked at in another video as well. So that is their role, and it's a monetary one, it's one of finance. So we can see here they obviously get profit, and they're powerful because they are involved in many projects over the world, and as we know from SAPs, they get a lot of say and a lot of influence in those countries because the terms and agreements between the countries to pay back the loans, etc., favour the World Bank and the IMF more than they favour the country that's taken the loan out. So the World Bank and the IMF, 189 countries paying into this. In the same way as you pay money into your bank, it will use that money to invest, and it will get money back, and it will make money. So this is just on a much bigger scale. So that's the World Bank and the IMF. Now the WTO has got 189 members as well. This enables trade. We know that it does that. It tries to reduce tariffs and taxes. It tries to promote free trade and encourage that. It tries to regulate trade and provide a framework for trade. And this is especially useful for poorer countries. And it's able to try and negotiate trade agreements for these countries and help. It helps settle disputes, and it has set up free trade zones in Asia, which is why one of the many reasons why Asia has flourished, and China and India, etc., and places like Vietnam have flourished, because the World Bank's kind of helped free trade up and get movement of goods tax and tariff free outside the boundaries of that country. We can suggest that it's not helped Sub-Saharan Africa as much, and we know about Sub-Saharan Africa being involved in production of primary products and commodities, and not being able to produce those commodities, etc. So, it's basically influencing and being a benefit to the rich countries, North America and Europe, more so than anyone else, and China and India and the BRICS as we kind of move forward with that power shift. It gives access to markets, tries to be equal. It gives some certainties to businesses and countries. However, we do know that it's not very powerful in terms of stopping taxes and tariffs coming into Europe, inside the European Union. There's still taxes and tariffs which benefit the European countries. And also within NAFTA, any goods coming in and out of America, it's not as good at reducing or getting rid of those taxes and tariffs. So again, it's more beneficial to be a member of this if you're a high-income country or a BRIC, one of those middle and rising income countries as well. So that's going to be more beneficial to you to get a good trade deal for your country and to improve your trade and the amount of money that your country is making. Right, the G and the G20 are becoming more and more powerful as time goes on, membership of these groups. Now they are organisations that meet to discuss trade problems, find solutions to trade issues. You have access to the world leaders from the most influential countries. So again, if you're looking at superpowers to be part of this, the G8 and the G20, it gives you a lot of power because you get to be at the conversation, you get to be at the table and having conversations with these powerful people who can change trade agreements, etc. The G20 is the organisation really that's flourished over the last few years and has got North America, Europe and the BRICS, the Asian tigers in it. So these are really the 20 most powerful economies in the world, and a lot of that is related to agriculture as well. So whereas the G8 kind of looks at maybe industry and business, quaternary, that kind of thing, the G20 also looks at agriculture. Now, 65% of global GDP goes through those G20 countries, and they've got 14% of the world's population. Now, actually, with China involved here, I've got another figure over here, and it's actually the G20 has actually got half the world's population involved, because obviously China and India are members of this now. So this is I think this is an old statistic, but the newest statistic I have is that half the world's population is involved in the G20. So just 20 countries in the world, half the population is involved in that. So again, they're powerful organisations because you are part of that conversation, you're part of those discussions to try and change trade or trade agreements, taxes and tariffs, that kind of thing. So it's important to be part of it. Now the OECD used to be, I'm going to suggest that the G20 is the most important of these global groupings, but the OECD set up after the Second World War again, and it's an international forum of countries to communicate, to look at democracy and the free market economy. So again, it's kind of a discussion group, as it were. It's a platform for problems and solutions, the same as the G8 and the G20. It's 36 highest income countries in the world, and they try and forecast and look at development issues. So they are trying to look at problems within poorer places, lower income countries, and look at what the solutions are. However, I would suggest that these two groups, I should say, have the interests of their countries at the top of their list. So being part of this will help you, and being outside these two organisations you're not going to have as much influence. If you're looking at superpowers, they're linked to superpowers. And you're not going to have as much globalization happening because you're not part of those discussions. So being part of these global groupings is really, really, really important. And then at the bottom, we've got some of the trade blocs here, which are also obviously intergovernmental organisations. I've got the EU, NAFTA and ASEAN. So these are trade blocs. They've got agreements on trade, which is a favourable system between them. So the EU is the one that we know best, hopefully. It's easier to trade and invest, and access to markets for your goods as well. It's easier to specialise in a production because you've got a market there to sell to, so it promotes specialisation within products. So the EU, only the EU has the movement of people, if we remember. NAFTA and ASEAN don't, so the EU, we are not part of this anymore maybe, so we're not going to have this free movement of people if we come out of the EU. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this, how it relates to the UK, and also how much power we kind of relinquish by leaving some of these organisations. We're going to have that will be quite interesting maybe to put into your essays when March comes around, and we maybe see some implications of that. You can maybe get a little bit more information to put in your exam questions when that comes about in May. So you get better deals, there's less taxes and tariffs here, you've got access to much bigger markets without taxes and tariffs on them, and you can buy and sell more, so it's about economies of scale as well, so product prices will come down, the market will grow that you're able to sell to without taxes and tariffs on, etc. And it gives you strength and security as well. A lot of these organisations, as we have talked about before, after the Second World War were also set up so that countries, if they're linked economically, they are maybe less likely to have military conflicts with each other. And we can see that with the G8 had Russia as part of the G8, but Russia's been kicked out now because of its incursions into Ukraine. I'll do another video in the future about that when we get onto the next unit, or the next part of this unit as well. And so the G8 and the G20 is about you being part of those conversations and you staying secure because you've got economic links with those countries. So just to recap, we're looking at IGOs in connection with globalization. Being a part of the IGO means that you're more globalized, you have more links to other countries. You can use lots of examples, we've got lots of examples here. You'd also maybe use a couple of examples, China, India, being part of those agreements, or Sub-Saharan Africa not. And then if we're looking at superpowers, then it's about influencing and being part of those conversations that give you power in order to keep your position. And America, no surprise, America and Europe are part of they're not part of ASEAN obviously, but they're part of all of these other global groupings, and that's another reason why they have power. Now we can also be a bit smart here and look at power shift and the fact that the G8 and the OECD were the very, very strong IGOs, but now in recent years we've got the G20 as being really the one that's good for being part of, and that's got the BRICS and the Asian Tigers, which we know are taking off more and more of the market, and they're involved in a lot of trade around the world, fully globalized. So we can say that being part of these is giving that shift to Asia, that's given that more momentum really, because they're part of the G20, the OECD, etc. They're already part of these two organisations. They've got their own trade bloc down here, and China's involved in a couple of trade deals obviously around the world, which gives it power. It's got obviously free trade zones within Asia set up by the WTO. So all of this you can talk about how maybe Europe and North America maintain power, but how maybe we can argue that the power is shifting to the east because of the increasing membership of these eastern nations into these global groupings. So that should help you with your globalization unit and your superpower unit as well.